every single day on The View is a contest in stupidity. Truly, it's an amazingly competitive match between some of the dumbest people on earth. No one really notices on a given day that Whoopi Goldberg is a very dumb person who says very dumb things, because everybody else is so dumb on The View that she's constantly outshone. She seems like the most sane person on The View, which is kind of an amazing statement. Trying to suss out which person on The View is least intelligent is an exercise in quantum mechanics. The genius sort of sage presence on The View. She's like, I'm not saying that maybe white people need to get beaten up for police reform to happen, but maybe white people need to get beaten up for police reform to happen.
But how many times do we need to see white people also get beaten before anybody will do it?
Okay, so first of all, this is unbelievably stupid.
Yep.
We've seen many cases of police brutality.
Every morning on The View feels like stumbling into a chaotic carnival, only the clowns aren't telling jokes. They're locked in a high-stakes shouting match. It's less panel discussion, more verbal dodgeball, where no one's safe and everyone's got a hot take to hurl. Strip away the canned laughter and the applause that sounds suspiciously on cue, and what's left is a spectacle of absurdity. An unspoken contest to see who can drop the most outrageous line before the next commercial break.
Through some of the cringiest moments from The View, a repository of nearly all human stupidity. She's trying to make an anti-Trump argument. She's like, I can say anything I want. And she's like, I'm going to say something super racist. They're all like, yeah. Well, apparently her hair was not her only bad decision that day.
The Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race. No, it's about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
No!
That's
who you talk to. Whoopi, always available to sign in.
Cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks.
To both compare Israel and the United States to terrorist organizations and also compare terrorist organizations to apparently not terrorist organizations. Like, Hamas is not a terrorist.
And here's the twist. Amid the daily whirlwind of voices crashing into each other, there's one figure who always seems to hover just above the chaos. Whoopi Goldberg. That's right, her. The unofficial matriarch of the table, revered like some all-knowing oracle. But let's not kid ourselves. What's often praised as profound wisdom? It's usually just opinions delivered with extra volume, well-timed sighs, and those perfectly calculated dramatic pauses that make everything sound deeper than it really is.
Was on that great repository of all human intelligence, The View, and she was explaining that people who are not using masks are going to make things more dangerous for themselves. She's talking about how the mask will protect you from the flu. Oh Lord. Here we go.
No, you know.
Well, you did have that.
I did have a cough, and when you did not show up, Brian goes, thanks, Whoopi's out.
Well, I assume that is because when you have little ones, you will always have things that you travel with. So as people will tell you, yeah, take off your mask, don't worry about it, we're not going to check anymore. Just know the flu
is still
will fly in. Yeah. Okay, the flu flew in and got me.
Okay, so I'm just going to point out here that the entire narrative on the mask was about COVID. And now we should probably wear a mask because if you take off the mask, the flu will go over the weekend to suggest that Nikki Haley is not a new generation. How can you say she's a new generation? Whoopi Goldberg is 67 years old. Nikki Haley is...
Let's take a moment to unpack why this actually matters. The View isn't just another daytime talk show. It's a full-blown emotional theater, a morning ritual for millions who tune in between sips of coffee and scrolling through their phones. But don't mistake it for a forum of balanced debate. If you came searching for facts or reasoned discourse, you've knocked on the wrong studio door. Here, emotions run the show, and logic. It usually gets booted before the first commercial break.
As anti-Semitism. She didn't say that Jews weren't specifically targeted, by the way. She didn't actually say an anti-Semitic thing the way that Whoopi Goldberg did. She just said that when people are inhumane to each other, bad things happen. For this great crime, she was not suspended. She was fired outright from The Mandalorian, losing presumably hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary. She was one of the main characters, and they were considering a spinoff of The Mandalorian with Gina. They fired Gina, so we hired her. Right? We have a new movie that's coming out with Gina Carano in the next couple of months, which I'm excited to tell you about. Okay, but they fired her outright, did Disney. Whoopi Goldberg says something far worse in every respect than Gina Carano ever said about the Holocaust. And she's going to get a 2-week suspension. Never look for consistency with the left. It is all just a game of power. In any case, Goldberg apparently is livid and feels humiliated over the suspension. She feels ABC executives mishandled this. She followed their playbook. She went on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert and then apologized again on The View the next day, the source told the Post. Her ego has been hurt. She's telling people she's going to quit. Suspension from The View is like getting suspended from Bravo. The bar is very low. Prior to her suspension, sources that spoke with Page Six said that employees and executives, including insiders at Disney, were furious over her remarks and the fact she had not been disciplined yet. Whoopi Goldberg, yesterday, she did her full apology. So you'll remember that 2 days ago, Whoopi Goldberg went on The View and she suggested that the Holocaust was not about race. And this tied into a broader ideology of the left, which suggests that Jews are white people and therefore the Holocaust was actually white people attacking white people, which is a thing she actually said on air. Then she went on Stephen Colbert, where she quasi-apologized and then doubled down and suggested once again that the Holocaust was not about racism because it was white people attacking other white people. She issued a written statement. The written statement came out before the Colbert appearance, but probably was written after she had taped for Colbert already. In any case, she came out on the air yesterday, and then she did her fulsome.
But here's where the temperature really starts to rise. Amid the familiar swirl of chaos and crosstalk, someone new enters the ring, an outsider with a different kind of energy. Calm, precise. The kind of speaker who doesn't raise their voice, but slices through the emotional noise with the sharp edge of logic. No theatrics, no grandstanding, just straight talk. And when that kind of energy collides with the reigning queens of daytime outrage, you don't just get sparks, you get a full-blown spectacle. And trust me, you're going to want front-row seats to this train wreck. Before we dive into what set the studio ablaze, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps us keep uncovering these moments and sharing stories that cut through the noise. Now back to the drama, because what happened next left the entire room frozen. No clapping, no chuckles. Just silence. It happened the moment Whoopi Goldberg opened her mouth and delivered a line that sucked the air out of the studio. Word for word, she said. Maybe white people need to get beaten up for police reform to happen. Flip that statement. Imagine anyone else, on any other network, saying something like that about any other race or group. The fallout would be immediate, unforgiving, and headline-making. But on The View, the response? Muted nods, a few awkward smiles. Zero challenge. No one pushed back. The real issue isn't just how outrageous the comment was, it's how casually it was accepted. Because let's be clear, police brutality isn't a problem exclusive to any one race. It's systemic. It affects people across demographics. What Whoopi framed as wisdom was, in reality, dangerously misguided. That wasn't a call for justice, it was a call for chaos, dressed in the calm tone of someone used to being heard without being questioned. As if she were delivering some profound philosophical revelation, Whoopi Goldberg has mastered the art of sounding wise, even when what she's saying is anything but. That's the persona she wears like a velvet robe on The View, the serene voice of reason, cloaked in calm, while casually dropping statements that are nothing short of incendiary. Because the real tension doesn't explode when someone yells back. No, it brews slowly, quietly, when someone steps into that studio armed not with emotion, but with logic. Cool, unflinching, relentless. When facts are laid bare in a room that thrives on feelings, the effect is electric. Keep watching, it's about to get even more uncomfortable. But first, let's rewind. Because this latest controversy, it wasn't Whoopi's first misstep, not by a long shot. You might think that after decades in front of the camera, decades in the public eye, she'd be more careful, more thoughtful with her words. But time and again, she's proven that she's willing to say the quiet part out loud, even when it's stunningly wrong. Take one of her most jaw-dropping moments, the time she claimed, live on air, that the Holocaust wasn't about race. Not once, but twice. Doubling down with the now infamous quote, "It's not about race, it's about man's inhumanity to man." As if that somehow neutralized the very clear, very documented fact that the Nazis targeted Jews specifically because they viewed them as an inferior race. That's not a controversial take, it's a foundational truth of modern history. Yet, she rewrote it in real time, as millions watched. And when the outrage hit, she didn't immediately own it. First came a baffling attempt to explain herself on The Late Show, still defending her warped perspective. Then, a stiff, half-hearted apology on The View. Finally, a polished written statement emerged, too little, too late. The damage was already done. While others, like a certain Mandalorian actress, were fired on the spot for far less provocative comments, Whoopi? She got a 2-week suspension, that's it. A symbolic slap on the wrist. Same parent company. People noticed, viewers, critics. Even insiders at Disney reportedly voiced frustration over the inconsistent accountability. The double standard wasn't just visible, it was undeniable. And as the controversy still smoldered, Whoopi returned to the table with the same unshaken confidence. Back to her usual rhythm, sharing wild, head-scratching takes with the same unbothered ease. This time, the fire starter? Masks. And once again, the fuse was lit. Yes, we're talking about those little pieces of cloth, the masks that somehow became the most controversial accessory of the decade. And on an episode of The View, Whoopi Goldberg decided to dive back into the debate, in her usual style, loud, confident, and wildly misinformed. She went on a passionate rant about why people still need to wear masks, not for COVID, not for general health safety, but because, in her words, the flu will fly in. Yes, the flu will fly in. As if it's a rogue mosquito circling your face, waiting for its chance to sneak in the moment you drop your guard. It was an almost cartoonish visual. Imagine the flu as a winged pest, buzzing around the studio lights. And as she said it, the rest of the panel nodded along in rhythmic agreement, like she had just quoted a peer-reviewed study from a top epidemiologist. No raised eyebrows, no challenges, no clarifications, just full acceptance, as if she had delivered gospel truth on live television. This is the same show that has spent years lecturing viewers about trusting the science. But now their so-called voice of reason was spinning playground science, and not a single co-host blinked. It's moments like this that expose the real engine behind The View. It's not about facts, it's about feelings. Whoopi's words aren't grounded in data. They're fueled by whatever seems emotionally satisfying at the time. And in that kind of environment, someone armed with actual facts, real statistics, and a clear understanding of logic becomes the ultimate disruptor. But before that storm hit, there was another moment, quieter, but equally revealing. The topic turned to Nikki Haley, former UN ambassador and current presidential candidate. And Whoopi, with a completely straight face, questioned how Haley could possibly represent a new generation of leaders. So yes, by any reasonable measure, Haley is a generational shift from the current lineup of political dinosaurs. That's not a partisan take, it's simple arithmetic. But math doesn't stand a chance on The View if it clashes with the script. Whoopi wasn't there to make a logical argument. She was tossing out dismissive one-liners, tailor-made for applause from an audience conditioned to cheer anything that feels progressive, even when it defies reality. And to be clear, this isn't about defending Nikki Haley or endorsing her politics. It's about calling out a deeper issue, how easily basic truths are sacrificed for the sake of emotional theatrics. It's a pattern we've seen again and again. Make a bold, dramatic claim. Wrap it in righteous energy. Pretend it's profound. Then hope the audience claps loud enough to drown out anyone asking real questions. The cracks were starting to show. Viewers, once dazzled by the dramatic outbursts and performative outrage, were beginning to see through the smoke and mirrors. The emotional spell that The View had cast for years was wearing thin. And when someone finally stepped in, not with louder outrage, but with calm, razor-sharp logic, it didn't just rattle the table. It flipped it over, shattered the illusion, and left everyone scrambling. Waiting just off stage was someone who came prepared, not to argue, not to match the drama, but to challenge every careless, emotionally charged word with something much more powerful. Truth. Cold, unsentimental, fact-checked truth. The stage couldn't have been more perfectly set. The View had become a carousel of hot takes, where emotion reigned supreme and facts were treated like party crashers. A place where drama sells, and reality is politely shown the door. And then came someone with a completely different presence. No grandstanding, no volume, just composure, precision, a command of history, data, and a zero-tolerance policy for nonsense. This wasn't just another guest segment, it felt more like a courtroom drama unfolding in real time. On one side, Whoopi Goldberg, comfortable in her usual role as the unchallenged voice of the table, tossing out sweeping statements with the confidence of someone used to applause, not scrutiny. On the other, someone who wasn't there to debate feelings. She was there to dismantle falsehoods like a surgeon, methodical, unemotional, exact. There were no raised voices, no exaggerated gestures, just a quiet unraveling. One by one, every emotional assertion that had once stirred the audience began to collapse under the weight of actual evidence. Arguments that sounded powerful in tone were exposed as empty in substance. Whoopi, so often the conductor of the conversation, was suddenly on the defensive, searching for footing, reaching for lines that didn't land. With her signature calm, steady tone, the one that usually lends weight to whatever she says, Whoopi dropped that line again. The one that had already sparked outrage once before. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't dramatized. It was delivered like a well-considered truth, and that made it even more chilling. The reaction was instant, but not in the way The View is used to. There were no cheers, no knowing nods, no claps from the audience, just dead air. The kind that makes producers hold their breath and camera operators freeze mid-pan. And still, Whoopi didn't flinch. She stood by her words, banking on her emotional conviction to carry the weight of the message. But across from her sat someone immune to that spell. No theatrics, no emotional rebuttal, just a quiet pause, and then a precise breakdown of why that statement wasn't just offensive, it was dangerous. He explained that justice isn't achieved through retribution. That racialized violence doesn't heal, it harms. It doesn't push reform, it poisons it. And in that moment, the illusion broke. With calm precision, he dismantled the idea that racially targeted violence was the path to justice. He didn't yell, didn't accuse, he simply laid out the facts, one after another. Real statistics, real stories, names and faces of victims from every background, not just the ones cherry-picked for headlines. He showed that police brutality isn't a racial checkbox, it's a systemic issue, deeply rooted and tragically widespread. Reform, he explained, doesn't come through vengeance. It comes through laws, pressure, accountability, structured change, not emotional chaos. It was a masterclass in clarity. And right there, in real time, Whoopi's position began to collapse. She tried to push back with her usual poise, but this time, the argument had no legs to stand on. The facts weren't just inconvenient, they were immovable. And while it all played out live, the internet was already watching, recording, clipping, waiting to react. Within hours, screenshots were flooding timelines. One image led the charge. Whoopi's face frozen in mid-reaction, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, caught between disbelief and realization as her argument was dismantled. That single frame became the meme of the day. Her name surged to the top of trending lists, flanked by words like obliterated, wrecked, ratioed. Twitter turned into a battlefield. Instagram feeds morphed into digital scrapbooks of stunned expressions. TikTok was relentless, looping the moment again and again, with stitched reactions layered on top. People weren't just watching, they were yelling at their screens, hands on heads, reacting like they'd just witnessed a plot twist in a courtroom drama. People began dissecting her words frame by frame. They analyzed tone, body language, and intent. The debate had become digital forensics. This wasn't just another hot take gone wrong, it was evidence. Evidence that even the most emotionally delivered argument can crumble when it collides with truth. And through the noise, a harsh reality began to emerge. Whoopi Goldberg, once viewed as the voice of calm reason on The View, was watching her credibility slip through her fingers. Each retweet, each reaction, each viral remix. It all chipped away at the persona she carefully built for decades. This wasn't just a heated segment. It was a cultural reckoning. A moment where emotion crashed headfirst into reality, and the internet made sure the whole world saw the wreckage. And while the dust was still settling, one thing became certain. This wasn't Whoopi's first controversy, and it probably wouldn't be her last. But when you take a step back and really examine the pattern, Whoopi's calm and wise persona starts to crack. And the picture underneath isn't nearly as polished. Her version of poise often masks a troubling trend. A history of headline-making missteps, wrapped in emotional delivery and passed off as incite. The Holocaust comments, they didn't come out of thin air. They were just the latest in a long string of eyebrow-raising takes on race, politics, science, that left viewers wondering whether facts ever had a seat at the Views table. It's not that emotion doesn't have a place, it does. Passion moves people. It grabs attention, it earns applause. But when emotion tries to stand in for evidence, when it becomes the entire argument, it eventually collapses under scrutiny. That's exactly what happened here. This wasn't about one line in one heated moment. This was the breaking point in a long overdue reckoning. Years of shaky reasoning, unchecked statements, and applause-fueled confidence were suddenly forced to face something they rarely encounter: accountability. And what made this moment so sharp, so unforgettable, wasn't a shouting match or some viral zinger. It was the quiet force of clarity. Because across the table sat someone who wasn't rattled, wasn't playing for the crowd. No raised voice, no theatrics. Just facts. Delivered steadily, clearly, with surgical precision. Each point landed like a clean strike. Undeniable, focused, and grounded in truth. You could see the shift. The silence wasn't for dramatic effect, it was real. Whoopi, usually so quick with comebacks, sat still. Her eyes darted, her hands fidgeted. She was searching for footing in an argument that had completely slipped away. Meanwhile, her opponent didn't flinch. He brought receipts, data, legal frameworks, historical context, all woven into one unshakable narrative. He broke down why advocating race-based violence is not activism, but a dangerous distortion. Why emotional appeals, while compelling, cannot replace thoughtful, responsible discourse on issues as complex as police reform. It didn't feel like a debate, it felt like a masterclass. And Whoopi. In that moment, she wasn't the authority figure. She was the one being taught. Unprepared, unarmed, and undeniably outmatched. There was nowhere left to hide, no applause cue, no cackling laughter to drown out the tension, no sympathetic co-host ready to jump in and save the moment. The usual rhythm of The View, the panel banter, the safe echo chamber of claps and nods, suddenly collapsed into something completely foreign for that set. And in that silence, something broke. Not just an argument, a carefully cultivated reputation, years in the making, began to unravel. The illusion of being untouchable, of always having the last word, shattered right there in front of millions. It wasn't just awkward, it was brutal, the kind of moment you can feel through the screen. Whoopi responded the way most public figures do when cornered. She shifted into damage control mode. Like clockwork, the apology came, measured, scripted, spoken directly into the camera with that familiar calm tone. The one designed to signal, "I'm in control." She tried to soften the blow, to reframe, to distance herself from what she had just said. But there was one problem. The internet had already moved on. Memes were already circulating. The clips were being edited, stitched, slowed down, captioned. That moment, her moment, was viral. And no matter how many times she tried to walk it back, she couldn't unsay it. The world had heard her, they had seen her. Then came the comparisons. Gina Carano, the actress from The Mandalorian, lost her entire role for making a controversial comment, one that, objectively, didn't come close to Whoopi's Holocaust remarks. But she was swiftly fired, no second chances, no daytime return. Meanwhile, Whoopi, a 2-week break, a brief media pause. then right back in her seat like nothing had happened. It wasn't just hypocrisy, it was a masterclass in selective accountability. Same network, same parent company. Two entirely different consequences. And people noticed. Not just Twitter warriors or political junkies. Everyday viewers. People who tune in over breakfast or while folding laundry. They saw it. And they remembered. What became painfully obvious wasn't just the unfairness, it was the protection. The system surrounding Whoopi, propping her up, insulating her from consequences that others wouldn't escape. But even that protection has its limits. Because once trust cracks, it doesn't mend easily. In this moment, it wasn't just about Whoopi. It was about something much bigger, a cultural turning point. For years, shows like The View thrived on a particular formula. Loud voices, hot takes, emotional eruptions, applause lines engineered for social media clips. It worked until it didn't. That formula was built on the assumption that no one would push back with substance in real time. But this time, someone did. And when facts finally entered the room, when logic, history, and calm reasoning were laid out plainly for everyone to see, it exposed just how paper-thin many of those emotional arguments really were. Audiences at home felt the shift. Not just the politically engaged or the digital native crowd, but regular viewers. People tired of being told how to feel. Tired of passion being mistaken for truth. Tired of theatrical outrage taking the place of honest, difficult, fact-based discussion. This moment stuck, because it flipped the script. It was the rare occasion where volume didn't win, where someone calmly, methodically dismantled the noise, and the noise had no comeback. One side looked shaken, the other looked solid. And in that contrast, viewers found something they didn't even realize they were craving. It was the moment someone finally said, "Enough," and didn't flinch when the heat of the studio lights hit. No hesitation, no scripted lines. Just unwavering clarity in a room built on noise. And what followed wasn't just a viral clip, it was a cultural message. In a world drowning in spin, facts still matter. And when they walk into the room, they don't need to yell. They simply exist, and in doing so, they silence everything else. That final blow didn't come with finger-pointing or dramatic sound bites. It landed with calm precision. A quiet, undeniable truth that sliced through the air like a scalpel. No theatrics, just impact. And suddenly the debate was over. There was nothing left to defend. Whoopi sat in stunned silence, her usual armor of confidence stripped away. The camera didn't miss a thing, her pause, the searching eyes, the shift in body language that said more than any comeback could. It was a rare moment where even she seemed to realize the gravity of what had just unfolded. Across the table, facts had done what emotion could not. No shouting match, no condescension. Just a methodical dismantling of every shaky claim, exposing how brittle emotionally driven arguments become when they're finally met with reason. But this wasn't just a one-on-one clash. It was a spotlight on something bigger. How media has traded logic for emotion, heat for light, and how desperately viewers are craving something real. Someone real, someone who holds the line. The internet crowned a winner that day, not just for the memes, but for the message. That flash of clarity hit home. People felt it. A shift. A wake-up call in a world full of static. And this time, the truth didn't just land, it echoed.